Okay, so you guys have really piled it on this time when it comes to negotiation strategies.
Hmm.
We've got a whole stack of stuff all focused around this Harvard approach.
Yeah.
And there's a handout on principal negotiation that we're going to dive into.
Right. Okay.
And then we also have an article straight from the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School.
Wow.
So a lot to get through, but I think our mission here is to try and distill down the essential principles of effective negotiation from all of these sources.
Okay.
And really give folks a shortcut to understanding how they can not only get what they want in a negotiation, but also build stronger relationships.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just about getting to yes.
No.
It's about creating agreements that are wise and efficient.
Smart.
And that last.
Yeah, that's the key.
And I think what's so interesting is that all of these sources are really pushing this idea of
Principled negotiation.
Yeah, principled negotiation. Exactly.
As opposed to what they call positional bargaining.
Right.
Which is kind of
like haggling, you know?
It is total haggling, yeah.
When you're buying a used car
Right.
and you go in with your low offer and they come in with a high offer.
Yeah. And you slowly
When you kind of meet in the middle.
inch towards each other.
Exactly.
And usually both sides kind of feel like,
a little ripped off.
yeah, you're like, did I leave money on the table?
Right, exactly.
Did I get, I don't know.
But I've held out longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Harvard folks are saying that actually that whole approach can be,
Surprisingly costly.
yeah,
It's not very efficient.
because you end up with agreements that,
Don't really meet everybody's needs
right.
or their interests, which is what they really emphasize.
Yeah. And it can damage those relationships because you're so dug in.
Right.
It becomes like this personal battle.
It's my way or the highway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're offering this whole other path.
Principled negotiation.
Yeah.
It's a better way. And the very first principle they highlight is this idea of,
Separating the people from the problem.
okay, separate the people from the problem.
Yeah.
So what do they mean by that?
You know, in a negotiation, it's so easy to get caught up
Yeah,
in your position.
in what you want.
Exactly in what you're demanding.
Right.
And when somebody challenges that demand,
Yeah,
it feels like a personal attack.
right. Like they're coming after you,
Exactly.
not your ideas.
Yeah. And then logic and reason kind of go out the window.
Oh, yeah, because then you get defensive
Totally.
and it just becomes this back and
You
forth.
dig your heels in.
And it's impossible to find common ground.
Yeah, you're not really listening anymore.
No, you're just trying to win.
You're just trying to score points.
So these people problems, as they call them,
Yeah.
they kind of break it down into three main areas.
Okay.
There's perceptions,
Mhm.
emotions are involved,
Of course.
and then just straight up communication.
Yeah. The way we talk to each other.
So let's start with perceptions.
Okay. What are they saying about how we perceive the situation and the other side?
Well, the first thing is try to see it from their point of view.
Okay. That sounds simple enough.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how often we don't do that.
Right. We just assume we're right.
Yeah, we think we see the world objectively,
Mm-hmm.
and if they disagree with us, they must be...
They must be biased or crazy or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we get out of that?
Well, they say you really have to look for information that might challenge your assumptions.
Okay, so actively try to disprove your own viewpoint.
In a way, yeah. Because
it
it can really help you understand where they're coming from.
see their perspective.
Exactly. And they also say, don't jump to conclusions about their intentions.
Oh yeah, it's easy to assume the worst.
Oh, especially in a negotiation.
Right. They're trying to screw me over.
Right, yeah.
So avoid that.
Yeah, and don't blame them for the problem.
Okay, so instead of blaming,
Yeah.
what should we do? Frame your proposals in a way that really speaks to their needs.
So they can see the benefits for themselves.
Exactly. If it's appealing to them,
Yeah.
they're much more likely to say yes.
That makes sense.
It's common sense,
Yeah.
but we don't always do it.
No, we don't.
Yeah,
Okay, so perceptions are huge,
big time.
but then there's also the emotional side of negotiation.
Oh yeah, things can get heated.
Definitely. So how do we navigate that?
Well, the key is to just recognize that emotions are always there
Okay.
and try to understand where they're coming from.
Even if you don't agree with them,
Yeah, even if you think they're being irrational.
because they're still real.
Exactly. All feelings are valid.
That's an important point.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, even if you don't personally understand them,
Right.
they're still driving their behavior.
So what do we do with all these emotions?
Well, sometimes the best thing is to just let them vent.
Okay. Let them express themselves.
Yeah, without you reacting defensively.
Right. So don't get emotional yourself.
Exactly. Stay calm and just listen. It can really de-escalate the situation.
And the handout also mentions symbolic gestures.
Oh, yeah, like a sincere apology.
Even if it's for something small?
Yeah, or just an expression of sympathy.
Just acknowledging their feelings?
Exactly. It can go a long way.
So it's almost like recognizing that we're all human and we have these feelings, and trying to fight them or ignore them just doesn't work.
It usually makes things worse.
Okay, so we've got perceptions and emotions. And then the third piece of this people problem is?
Communication.
Yeah, so what are they saying about how we should be communicating in a negotiation?
Well, they emphasize active listening.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means really paying attention to what the other person is saying.
Not just waiting for your turn to talk.
No, actually listening and trying to understand their perspective.
And maybe reflecting back what you hear.
Yeah, summarizing their points to make sure you've got it right.
Okay, because that shows that you're really engaged.
It builds trust. When people feel heard, they're much more open to working with you.
Okay, so active listening is key.
Absolutely.
What else?
They also talk about being direct.
Okay.
Yeah, making sure your communication is aimed at the other person.
So like eye contact and...
Yeah, and using your name.
Okay.
And making it clear that you're speaking to them.
Right.
Not just talking in general.
Got it.
And focused on the message you want to convey.
Okay, so be clear and concise.
Exactly. And avoid blaming language.
Oh, yeah, because that just puts people on the defensive.
Totally. It shuts down communication.
Right.
So the handout suggests using I statements.
Okay, so instead of saying you did this wrong,
yeah,
you would say, I feel this way because of.
Exactly. It takes the blame out of it.
Okay, and it keeps it focused on your own experience.
Yeah, and the goal is to really create a sense of partnership.
Okay.
Where you're working together to solve the problem.
Not against each other.
Right, not as adversaries.
So it's all about collaboration.
Yeah, working towards a common goal.
I like that.
It's a better way to negotiate.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on this first principle.
Separating the people.
Yeah, separating the people from the problem.
Which is fundamental.
It is.
Yeah.
But there's more.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole framework here.
Okay, so what's the next principle of effective negotiation?
Well, it's all about focusing on interests, not positions.
Okay. Interests, not positions.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So a position is what someone says they want.
Okay. It's their demand.
Exactly.
Okay.
But their interests are the underlying needs and desires that are driving that demand.
So it's the why behind the what.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that's important.
Yeah, and the Harvard approach says that when you focus on interests, you often find that there are many different ways to satisfy those needs.
Okay, so you're not stuck on just one solution.
Right. You're opening up possibilities.
So instead of arguing over positions, you're exploring different ways to meet everyone's needs.
Exactly. And that's where the creative solutions come from.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah, it's a much more collaborative approach.
Okay, so the Harvard Peon article actually gives a really good example of this.
Oh, yeah. The one with the siblings?
Yeah.
Trying to plan their parents' anniversary party?
Right. One wanted to have it at a restaurant and the other wanted to have it at home.
And they were totally stuck.
They were butty heads.
Yeah, until they dug a little deeper.
And figured out their interests.
Right. So what were their interests?
Well, the one who wanted the restaurant was worried about the time commitment of hosting at home.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the one who wanted to host at home was concerned about the cost of a restaurant.
Ah, so it wasn't really about the location.
No, it was about the underlying issues.
Time and money.
Exactly.
And once they figured that out,
yeah,
they were able to find a solution.
They found a compromise.
Right. They chose an inexpensive restaurant.
Which addressed both of their interests.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's a classic example of how focusing on interests can lead to a win-win.
So for our listeners out there,
how can they actually put this into practice?
Well, the handout gives some really good advice.
Oh.
First of all, when the other party states their position, don't just accept it at face value.
Okay, so dig a little deeper.
Yeah. Ask why.
Okay, why do they want that?
Exactly. And keep asking why until you get to the root of their motivation.
Okay, uncover those underlying interests.
Yeah, and it's equally important to articulate your own interests clearly.
So don't just say what you want.
No, explain why it's important to you.
Okay, so be transparent about your motivations.
Exactly, and frame the discussion of interests looking forward.
Okay, so towards solutions.
Yeah, not dwelling on past conflicts.
So it's not about who's right or wrong?
No, it's about finding a way forward.
That meets everyone's needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, you can be firm on your interests, but flexible on how those interests are met.
Okay, so it's not about getting your way.
No.
It's about getting your needs met.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, and the handout also reminds us that we all share some basic human interests.
Like what?
Oh, things like security and well-being.
Okay, basic needs.
Yeah, and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So those can be good starting points.
So finding common ground.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered separating the people from the problem, focusing on interests, not positions.
Yeah.
What's the third principle?
Well, it's all about inventing options for mutual gain.
Ooh, now we're talking.
Yeah, this is where the creativity comes in.
So instead of just trying to divide up the pie, we're trying to make the pie bigger.
Exactly, expand the pie.
So everyone gets more.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Okay, but the handout says there are some obstacles.
There are some pitfalls.
To thinking creatively.
Yeah, we all fall into these traps.
Okay, so what are they?
Well, the first one is premature judgment.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means shooting down ideas before they've been fully explored.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
Especially our own ideas.
Right, we're like, oh, that'll never work.
And we don't even give it a chance.
Yeah, okay, so avoid premature judgment.
Yes, let those ideas breathe a little.
Okay, what's the next obstacle?
Well, it's this tendency to search for the single right answer.
Ooh, yeah, we want that silver bullet.
Exactly. But often there are many good solutions.
So we need to broaden our perspective.
Yes, explore multiple possibilities.
Okay, what else gets in the way?
Well, sometimes we fall into the trap of seeing it as a win-lose situation.
Right.
Which limits the potential for collaboration.
Because you're just trying to beat the other side.
Yeah, you're not looking for shared interests.
Okay, and the final obstacle?
It's thinking that it's the other side's responsibility to solve your problems.
Oh, yeah, like it's their job to make you happy.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we overcome these creativity killers?
Well, the handout offers some pretty good advice.
Let's hear it.
First of all, separate inventing from judging.
Okay, so brainstorm first.
Yeah, just get all those ideas out there.
Without evaluating them.
Right, no criticism allowed.
Okay, that's hard.
It is, but it's important.
Okay, what else?
Broaden your options.
So think outside the box.
Yeah, don't just settle for the obvious solutions.
And try to find those mutual gains.
Yes, look for solutions that benefit both sides.
Okay. And the handout also says to make it easy for the other side to say yes.
Yes, make your proposals appealing.
Okay, so they don't feel like they're losing out.
Exactly. It should feel like a win for them, too.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, it's all about creating value.
So they actually give some really practical tips in the handout for how to do this. Brainstorm as many solutions as possible before you start evaluating.
Yeah, quantity over quality at first.
Okay, and then when you do start evaluating,
start with the most promising proposals.
Okay.
And work on refining them.
And they say to focus on those shared interests.
Yes, because that's where the win-win lies.
And even when your interests differ, try to make those differences compatible.
Or even complementary.
Okay, so turn those differences into opportunities. And they say to think about who the decision makers are.
Yeah, and tailor your proposals to their needs.
Smart.
Because they're the ones who ultimately have to say yes.
Right.
So make it easy for them.
Okay, so the handout gives this really great piece of advice.
Yeah, what is it?
Look for items that are of low cost to you and high benefit to them. And vice versa.
That's the key.
So what are those things that you don't really care about,
Yeah.
but they really value?
Exactly, and find the things that they're willing to give up.
That are important to you.
That's how you create a win-win.
Okay, so that's principle number 3.
Inventing options for mutual gain.
Yeah, so we've covered separating people from the problem, focusing on interests, not positions, and inventing options for mutual gain.
Right.
What's the 4th principle?
The 4th principle is to insist on using objective criteria.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, it means that when your interests clash, you should try to use fair, independent standards to decide the outcome.
So instead of just arguing about who's right, you look for some kind of external benchmark.
Exactly, some kind of objective measure.
Okay. I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah, it takes the emotion out of it.
And it focuses on fairness.
Exactly. It's about finding a solution that's legitimate.
So what kind of objective criteria are we talking about?
Well, it could be market value.
Okay.
Or precedent from similar situations.
So what's been done before.
Exactly. Or expert opinions.
Right.
Or industry standards.
Or even legal principles.
Yeah, anything that both sides can agree is fair and relevant.
Okay, so the key is that both sides have to buy into it.
Exactly. It has to be mutually acceptable.
Otherwise, it's not really objective.
Right.
So how do you actually go about introducing these objective criteria?
Well, the handout suggests framing each issue as a joint search.
Okay, so not just saying, this is the standard we're going to use.
No, involve the other side in the process.
So discuss what criteria they think would be fair.
Yeah, and work together to find the best benchmarks.
Yeah, okay, so it's a collaborative process.
It is, and it's important to be open-minded.
Okay.
Consider different types of criteria.
And be willing to discuss how they should be applied.
Exactly, and most importantly, never yield to pressure. Only to principles.
So don't let them bully you into accepting something that's not fair.
Exactly. If they won't engage in a rational discussion, then you might need to shift the focus.
To what?
To procedural criteria.
Okay, so how you make decisions.
Yeah, fair processes for resolving disputes.
Okay, so if they're not going to play by the rules, you change the rules.
In a way,
yeah.
You establish a fair process.
I like that.
It can be very effective.
Okay, so that's principle number 4.
Insisting on using objective criteria.
Which is all about anchoring the negotiation in fairness.
Yeah, not just power or stubbornness.
Now, the Harvard Peon article also talks about this concept of BATNA.
Right.
What does that stand for?
It stands for best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Okay, so what is that?
Well, it's basically your best option.
Yeah.
If you can't reach an agreement in this negotiation.
So it's like your backup plan.
Yeah, your walkaway point.
But it's not just about walking away.
No, it's about knowing what you'll do if you walk away.
Okay, so you're not just giving up.
Right. You have other options.
And that gives you leverage.
It does.
Because you're not desperate to make a deal.
Exactly. You're willing to walk away if it's not in your best interest.
So the article says you should figure out your BATNA before you start negotiating.
Absolutely.
And try to improve it.
Yeah, because a strong BATNA gives you more power.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it also gives you confidence.
Because you know you have a good alternative.
Exactly.
So if the deal on the table isn't good enough,
you
can walk away knowing that you'll be okay.
Exactly.
That's empowering.
It is.
Okay, so now we've covered the 4 principles from Fisher and Ori's book.
Getting to. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a classic.
It is, but we also have this other document.
Pasted text.
Yeah, and it brings up something really interesting.
What's that?
The idea that communication in a negotiation isn't just about the words we say.
Right, it's much more than that.
So what else is there?
Well, they talk about body language.
Okay.
And tone of voice.
Okay.
And they even cite research that says that 55% of communication is body language.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
So our posture and our facial expressions and
all of that.
It's all communicating something.
Even if we're not aware of it.
And then they say 38% is tone of voice and pace of speech.
So how we say things matters a lot.
Okay, so that leaves, what, 7% for actual words?
Yeah, it's a small percentage.
That's crazy.
It is, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, because you can tell a lot from someone's body language and their tone of voice.
Yeah, you can tell if they're being sincere.
Or if they're hiding something.
Exactly.
So how do we use this to our advantage in a negotiation?
Well, first of all, just be aware of your own nonverbal cues.
Okay, so pay attention to how you're coming across.
Yeah, and be sensitive to the other person's body language and tone of voice.
Because they're giving you clues.
They are, even if they're not saying it out loud.
So it all ties back to that first principle.
Separating the people from the problem.
Right, because effective communication, both verbal and nonverbal, helps us manage those emotions.
And build trust.
And really understand each other.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Okay, so the pace to text also gives us these 6 guidelines to,
From Harvard.
Yeah.
It's a good summary.
Are these like totally new ideas?
Not really.
Or are they just reframing what we've already talked about?
It's more of a condensed checklist.
Okay.
That aligns with the 4 principles from getting to
Okay, so what are they?
Well, the first one is separate the people from the problem.
Okay, we've covered that.
What's next?
Focus on interests, not positions.
Another familiar one.
Yeah. What else?
Manage emotions.
Okay, that's part of the people problem.
Exactly. Express appreciation.
Okay, so acknowledge their perspective.
Yeah, and show that you value the relationship.
Makes sense.
What's next?
Put a positive spin on your message.
Yeah, so focus on the benefits.
Instead of the drawbacks.
Exactly.
Okay, and the last one.
Escape the action and reaction cycle.
Okay, so don't get caught up in that emotional back and forth.
Yeah. Stay focused on the goal.
Which is finding a mutually beneficial agreement.
Exactly.
So these 6 guidelines really reinforce those core principles.
They do. They're a good reminder
of how to approach negotiation effectively.
Yeah.
Now, the pace to text also mentions this thing called the zone of possible agreement.
Or ZOPA.
ZOPA, what's that all about?
Well, it's basically the range of outcomes where an agreement is possible.
Okay.
Because there's overlap between what each side is willing to accept.
So it's like the bargaining zone.
Yeah, the sweet spot.
Where a deal can be made.
Exactly.
Okay, so understanding the ZOPA can help you strategize. Now, I thought the ending of the pasted text was really interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty blunt.
It said that a lot of people don't get what they deserve.
Because they don't negotiate?
Yeah, they just accept what they're given.
They don't even try.
And they highlighted all these benefits of good negotiation skills.
Like faster progress.
Higher pay.
Greater respect.
So it's not just about getting more money.
No, it's about getting what you're worth.
And feeling valued.
Exactly.
So their call to action was...
negotiate for what you deserve.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask.
Closed mouths don't get fed.
I like that.
It's true.
Okay, so let's sum up all this great information.
Okay.
We've learned a lot about the Harvard approach to negotiation.
Principled negotiation.
Yeah, which boils down to these 4 key principles. Separate the people from the problem.
Right.
Focus on interests, not positions.
Yes.
Invent options for mutual gain. And insist on using objective criteria.
Those are the 4 pillars.
And we also talked about the importance of understanding your BTNA.
Your best alternative?
Yeah.
And communicating effectively.
Both verbally and non-verbally.
Absolutely.
So the goal is to create agreements that are wise and efficient.
And that build relationships.
Instead of damaging them.
Exactly. It's a better way to negotiate.
It is.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for our listeners.
Okay.
Think back to a recent interaction.
Yeah.
Where you might have used a more positional approach.
Okay.
And ask yourself how applying these principles...
the ones we've discussed today.
Yeah, especially focusing on interests and inventing options for mutual gain.
Yeah.
How might that have changed the outcome?
Interesting.
And even the relationship.
It's worth considering.
It is. And maybe even dig into those recommended readings.
Getting to, yes.
And negotiating rationally.
Yeah, those are great books.
They are, and they'll help you put these principles into practice.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It has.
Yeah.
Until next time.
See you then.